The elaborate halls of the Varelia embassy reverberated with the heavy impact of boots on marble as Lieutenant Elias Cade proceeded towards the ambassador's office. His uniform now felt unfamiliar on him, having been stripped of its decorations and rank insignia. Only the lieutenant bars remained, a constant, sharp reminder of his demotion. Enter was the command issued by Ambassador Thorne's voice from behind the intricately carved wooden door. Elias stepped inside, his body automatically snapping into a posture of rigid attention. Old habits proved difficult to discard, particularly for a man who had dedicated 15 years to Earth's special forces. At ease, Ambassador Thorne stated without looking up from his illuminated holographic display. Or perhaps I should address you as Advisor Cade. That is your new designation now. Lieutenant is acceptable, Sir Elias responded, his tone devoid of emotion. The ambassador finally lifted his gaze, scrutinizing Elias with a deliberate intensity. Thorne, a seasoned career diplomat, possessed an unnerving ability to discern character instantly, a proficiency that had served him exceptionally well across 17 diverse planetary assignments. You are fully aware of the nature of this assignment, I assume. Thorne's voice was measured and highly professional. I am tasked with serving as a security consultant for the Earth Embassy on Varelia. A polite term for diplomatic exile if we are being frank, sir. A brief, almost imperceptible twitch affected Thorne's lips. Honesty is valuable, Lieutenant, but diplomacy often demands selective transparency. Your professional history suggests you find that distinction challenging. The unspoken mention of the Riel incident lingered heavily between them. Elias had chosen to disregard explicit orders to retreat from a humanitarian evacuation zone when a local militia had launched an assault on civilian shelters. His intervention had ultimately secured 300 refugees, but in doing so, he had transgressed 6 separate protocols and nearly triggered an international crisis. The subsequent military tribunal had shown surprising clemency, granting a demotion instead of a dishonorable discharge, though it was universally understood that this advisory post was merely a convenient strategy to remove a troublesome officer from the public eye. Your specific abilities are required here, Ambassador Thorne continued, motioning towards a chair. Varelia presents a complex situation. They have maintained their autonomy from the Galactic Confederation for centuries due to a combination of highly valuable natural resources and an impenetrable traditional culture. They are inherently xenophobic, hierarchical, and extremely proud. Yet for the very first time in their recorded history, they are indicating a willingness to engage in meaningful diplomatic relations. A holographic projection of a tall, elegant figure materialized above the ambassador's desk. The Varelian female displayed the species' distinctive silver-blue skin and elongated facial features, but her demeanor possessed a unique quality, a quiet, resolute determination visible in her violet eyes. That is Princess Ariana, Thorne explained, the sole heir to the Varelian throne and notably a proponent of reform. She has been actively pressuring her father, Emperor Valerian, to modernize certain elements of their society, including their fiercely isolationist stance. The royal court is deeply split on this matter, with numerous noble houses vehemently opposing any deviation from their established traditions. Elias studied the projected image. And my function in this, sir? Tonight the princess is scheduled to attend a diplomatic reception at the Central Spire. This is unprecedented. Varelian royalty rarely if ever participates in foreign functions. I require security personnel who possess an acute understanding of both diplomatic protocols and potential threats. Your background renders you uniquely suited for this task. Thorne's expression became distinctly serious. This is not simply a routine assignment, Cade. The stakes are exceptionally high. Any disruption to these critical initial discussions could severely hinder Earth-Varelian relations for decades. Elias felt a familiar, burdensome pressure settle upon his shoulders. I grasp the gravity of the situation, sir. No, I do not believe you fully comprehend it, Thorne countered. The Varelians possess a rigid social structure. Their traditions are not merely cultural practices, they are practically etched into their very DNA after millennia of ritual adherence. One of these customs, the Darth Bond, holds particular sanctity. It is a life-debt ritual so foundational to their society that it is referenced in nearly every aspect of their legal and ethical framework. A life debt? Elias inquired, his curiosity momentarily piqued despite his disciplined nature. When the life of a Varelian royal is preserved by another, an ancient binding covenant is established, one that links their life forces in ways our scientific community still struggles to fully comprehend. It is part mystical, part biological. The Varelians interpret it as the manifestation of their ancestors will channeled through blood and sacrifice. Elias slowly nodded, absorbing the new information. And how does this specifically pertain to this evening's function? It does not, Thorne stated firmly. I am merely providing necessary cultural context. Your specific duty is to observe, safeguard our interests and remain completely unobtrusive. Remember, Cade, you are not here to act as a hero. You are here because this assignment is preferable to a dishonorable discharge. Is that understood? Perfectly clear, sir. The central spire was a worthy namesake, a colossal twisted monolith of pearlescent stone that stretched toward Varelia's twin moons like a gigantic finger pointing skyward. Elias adjusted the collar of his formal wear, a dark blue Earth diplomatic corps uniform that felt restrictive and cumbersome compared to his standard military tactical gear. From his vantage point near the eastern perimeter of the Grand Reception Hall, he commanded an unobstructed view of the entire chamber while maintaining a relatively unconspicuous presence. The hall was filled with a diverse assembly of Earth diplomats, representatives from allied interstellar worlds, and a select handful of Verlian nobles who had condescended to attend. Quite the spectacle, would you not agree? A voice inquired beside him. Elias turned to see a human woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed in the ambassadorial formal attire. He recognized her instantly as Dr. Lydia Savoy, Earth's foremost xenoanthropologist and cultural liaison. It is certainly elaborate, Elias admitted, gesturing towards the ornate decorations and the ceremonial guards stationed throughout the hall. The Verlians never do anything halfway, Dr. Savoy commented. Every movement, every adornment carries a profound meaning. Observe those crystalline structures suspended from the ceiling? They symbolize the ancestral bloodlines of the royal house. And those guards are not just for display. They are Sentinel elites sworn to the Emperor from childhood. Their participation here is a profound honor. Elias nodded, his attention suddenly drawn by a subtle alteration in the room's dynamic. The assembled guests were all turning towards the main entrance where a herald had just appeared. Her Royal Highness Princess Ariana Virilan Solaris, heir to the eternal throne, keeper of the sacred flames and voice of the coming dawn, the herald proclaimed, his voice resonating powerfully throughout the entire hall. The princess made her entrance, and the distinction between her holographic image and her physical reality was immediately striking. She moved with an effortless fluidity, her silver blue skin catching the light like finely polished metal. Her traditional royal attire, sweeping robes of deep purple and silver, appeared to shimmer with every single step, yet it was her expression that captured Elias's focus. Beneath the carefully maintained ceremonial composure lay a sharp intellect and a visible, meticulously managed tension. She is undertaking an immense risk by being present here, Dr. Savoy murmured. The conservative faction of the court views any interaction with external parties as a defilement of their sacred bloodlines. There are whispers that several noble houses would prefer her deceased rather than permit her proposed reforms to proceed. Elias's senses immediately intensified at the mention of the word dead. His eyes began to scan the room with greater focus, noting the positions, the behaviors, and the potential threats. Years of intense combat training were impossible to switch off simply by changing uniforms. Princess Ariana navigated the gathering with skilled diplomatic grace, exchanging formalized greetings with the Earth officials. When she reached Ambassador Thorne, she offered a slight inclination of her head, a gesture Dr. Savoy quietly informed Elias was unheard of, as Verlian royalty traditionally acknowledged no one as their equal. The winds of change are capable of blowing even through the most ancient of forests, Ariana said to Thorne, her voice melodious, possessing the distinctive Verlian accent that rendered human languages sounding like poetry. And with change invariably comes new growth. Your Highness, Thorne replied, clearly delivering a rehearsed formal response. Elias continued his detailed surveillance, noting with genuine apprehension that several Verlian nobles were observing the princess with barely concealed contempt. One individual in particular, a tall, imposing figure with elaborate facial markings identifying him as a high-ranking court official, appeared to be tracking her every single move with cold, focused calculation. The gathering proceeded smoothly with ritualistic addresses and formal interchanges. Elias maintained unwavering alertness, even though there was no overt sign of danger. As attendants began distributing beverages for a ceremonial toast, he detected a minor anomaly, a server moving with excessive determination and taking a path too direct toward the princess. Instinct took command. Elias acted before his mind could fully register the menace, navigating the assembly with trained fluidity. The server's hand dipped inside his ceremonial vest and re-emerged grasping a metallic object. A ritual dagger with ancient glyphs etched into its blade. Time seemed to distort. Elias watched the assailant's arm begin its deadly arc toward the princess's exposed back. He witnessed the brief shocked widening of Ambassador Thorne's eyes as he too recognized the peril. He saw the guards turning, but too far away to intervene promptly. With 3 long, swift strides, Elias launched himself, interposing his body between the weapon and Ariana. A burst of intense pain erupted across his chest as the dagger sliced through his formal uniform and deeply into the underlying flesh. He heard cries, saw the look of utter surprise on the princess's face as she turned, and felt the warm gush of blood soaking his shirt. The would-be killer was instantly overwhelmed by the Sentinel guards, but Elias barely noticed. His focus was fixed on the peculiar sight unfolding where his blood had spattered onto the marble floor. The droplets were luminescent, pulsating with an unnatural light that appeared to reach out towards the princess. Ariana's expression transitioned from shock to swift recognition, and finally to what appeared to be profound dread. "No," she whispered, the single word laden with an unfathomable significance to Elias. As his consciousness began to fade, Elias observed the glowing blood forming complex patterns on the marble, patterns that precisely mirrored the ancient symbols carved on the ceremonial pillars throughout the chamber. The final thing he perceived before being enveloped by darkness was Ariana sinking to her knees beside him, pressing her hand firmly to his wound, and the simultaneous sensation of ice and fire surging through his veins where her skin made contact with his blood. "The Darth Bond awakens," a voice declared, filled with a mix of reverence and terror. "The ancestors have made their choice." Elias woke to the sensation of soft textiles against his skin and the unfamiliar aroma of exotic spices permeating the air. His eyes opened to reveal a high, domed ceiling inlaid with shimmering materials that refracted the light like 1,000 tiny stars. He tried to sit up but was stopped by a sharp, searing pain across his chest. "Remain still," a melodic voice instructed from nearby. "The restorative process is not yet finished." Turning his head, Elias saw Princess Ariana seated beside his bed, her formal robes replaced by simpler attire of deep blue. They were entirely alone in what seemed to be a luxurious, private chamber within the royal palace, a place likely never before accessed by a human. "What transpired?" he inquired, his voice hoarse from lack of use. "The attacker was apprehended and has been subjected to interrogation," she explained, her violet eyes studying him with an uncomfortable intensity. "He was hired by factions opposed to my proposed reforms, though he perished before disclosing which noble house masterminded the plot." "Perished?" Elias questioned. "Our methods of inquiry are highly effective," she stated without further detail. "However, that is not the issue of most immediate concern." Elias then noticed her absently tracing a pattern on her wrist, one that glowed faintly beneath her silver-blue skin. Looking down at his own chest, he saw that beneath the dressings covering his injury, a similar light pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "The Darth Bond," he murmured, recalling the ambassador's pre-mission brief. Ariana nodded solemnly. "You possess some understanding of the concept then?" "Only superficially. Something about a life-debt tradition." She stood and moved towards a carved stone basin in the corner, dipping her fingers into what looked like a luminous liquid. "It is significantly more than mere tradition, Lieutenant Cade. It is the most ancient and sacrosanct connection in our culture, a covenant that entirely transcends simple obligation." Returning to his bedside, she elaborated, "When you intercepted the blade meant for me, when your blood was spilled onto the ancestral symbols on our consecrated ground, you initiated a biological and spiritual procedure that is irreversible. Our life forces are now interlinked." Elias struggled to grasp this information. "Interlinked? How precisely?" "It occurs in phases," she explained. "The Darth Bond progresses through 5 distinct stages. We have only completed the first, initiation through blood. The remaining 4 must be fulfilled strictly according to ancient statutes, or," she paused. "Or what?" "Or we both will succumb," she stated simply. "The bond, once activated, demands its completion. If it is denied, it results in a wasting sickness that afflicts both participants. Our scientists have researched this phenomenon for centuries but have found no way to sever an initiated bond." Elias stared at her in disbelief. "You are telling me I am now magically bound to you, and if I don't participate in some alien ritual, we both expire?" "It is not magic," she corrected firmly. "It is a biochemical and quantum resonance that our forebears genetically encoded thousands of years ago. The fact that it can impact human physiology is wholly unprecedented. We believed it to be specific only to Varelian biology." She looked visibly troubled by this finding, and Elias wondered what other assumptions her people might have made about humans that were now proving false. "So what must happen next?" he asked. "Now you assume the role of my Darth Sentinel, my sworn protector, until all phases of the bond are complete." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "And if I decline?" Ariana's expression hardened. "Then you effectively condemn us both to a slow, agonizing death." "The bond cannot be terminated, Lieutenant." Not by choice, not by distance, and not by technology. It is now woven into the essential fabric of our beings. Elias attempted to sit up again, moving with greater caution this time. I must contact my superiors. I need to explain the situation. Ambassador Thorne has already been notified, she interrupted. He has agreed that you will remain here as my security advisor. That was the term he employed. It is a diplomatic fiction created to justify your presence within the royal court. I have no say in this? Did you have a say when you instinctively threw yourself in front of that blade? She countered, a hint of genuine curiosity in her voice. Elias had no adequate reply. His action had been purely reflex, the culmination of years of training and perhaps an even more fundamental aspect of his own character. The second phase will commence shortly, Ariana said after a moment of silence. Memory sharing. It cannot be controlled or directed. The bond will independently select which memories are to be exchanged between us. Wait, Elias protested, sudden alarm surging through him. You will see my memories? All of them? Not all, she clarified. Only those the bond deems essential to our established connection. Similarly, I cannot select which of my memories will be disclosed to you. It is a process of mutual vulnerability. The thought of anyone, especially this alien princess, witnessing his most private, harrowing moments sent a shudder through Elias. There were events in his past he had never disclosed, things that actively haunted his sleep. How much time do I have before this second phase begins? Days perhaps, she replied. And there is something else you should be aware of. Ariana paused, clearly choosing her next words with great care. My father, the Emperor, does not know the full scope of what has transpired. He has only been told that a human security officer prevented an assassination attempt and was injured in the process. Why keep the Darth Bond a secret from him? Her violet eyes met his directly. Because when he discovers that his sole heir is now eternally bonded to a human, the repercussions will be far-reaching, consequences that neither of us may be fully prepared to confront. Elias's formal introduction to the Varelia royal court occurred 3 days later, once the palace physicians certified him fit enough to walk. He had spent the intervening time confined to his chambers, absorbing information about Varelian culture and politics from data feeds and occasional visits from Ariana, who seemed determined to prepare him for the complex social environment he was about to enter. The throne room of the Eternal Palace was immense, stretching longer than a football field, its walls lined with colossal statues of former emperors. The ceiling opened directly to the sky through a series of meticulously cut crystal panels that dispersed rainbow light across the assembled courtiers. At the far end, Emperor Valerian sat upon a throne carved from a single piece of what appeared to be fossilized wood, its surface embedded with glowing minerals. Elias walked beside Ariana, acutely aware of the hundreds of Varelian nobles scrutinizing his every move with expressions ranging from simple curiosity to unveiled disgust. He wore a specially tailored uniform that attempted to merge Earth diplomatic corps styling with traditional Varelian design elements, an effort at cultural bridge building that felt awkward and purely performative. Remember, Ariana murmured as they approached the throne. Speak only when directly addressed. Maintain respectful eye contact but do not fix your gaze. And under no circumstances mention the bond. Emperor Valerian was imposing even by Varelian standards, his silver-blue skin bearing the additional markings of age and wisdom, constellation-like patterns across his forehead and cheeks. His eyes, the same violet shade as his daughter's, carried the heavy weight of centuries of tradition. Father, Ariana said, executing a formal bow that Elias clumsily attempted to imitate. I present Lieutenant Elias Cade of Earth, who acted to preserve my life during the regrettable incident at the diplomatic function. The Emperor studied Elias with an unreadable gaze. Approach, human, he commanded, his voice resonant and powerful. Elias stepped forward, feeling the oppressive weight of tradition and suspicion pressing down on him. You intervened when my daughter's life was endangered, the Emperor stated. This action, while unexpected from an outsider, warrants recognition. You will be granted the temporary status of honor guard during your recuperation and until diplomatic protocols for your return to Earth can be arranged. It was clearly a pre-scripted statement, likely the result of negotiations between the Emperor's advisors and the Earth Embassy. Elias inclined his head in acknowledgement, noting the subtle but pointed emphasis on the words temporary and return to Earth. Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty, he replied, using the formal address Ariana had drilled into him. As he straightened, Elias became aware of a tall, austere Varelian male observing him intently from the Emperor's right side. The male's facial markings identified him as a high-ranking noble, and the medallion around his neck bore the symbol of the Imperial Advisory Council. That is High Counselor Axon, Ariana whispered, following his gaze. My father's most trusted advisor, and the most powerful voice for tradition in the court. Be cautious of him. Axon's eyes narrowed slightly as he noticed their exchange, and Elias had the distinct feeling of being assessed, much like one might evaluate a potential threat or a useful instrument. The formal presentation continued with ritualized exchanges, but Elias's attention was repeatedly drawn back to Axon, who remained silent but seemed to absorb everything with cold, calculated precision. There was something disturbingly familiar in that steady gaze, a quality Elias had witnessed in military commanders who viewed soldiers as expendable assets rather than individuals. Later, as they departed the throne room, Elias felt a strange sensation wash over him, a momentary disorientation followed by what felt like a cool breeze across his consciousness. Beside him, Ariana stumbled mid-step. It is beginning, she whispered, reaching out to brace herself against a pillar. The second phase. The world around Elias dissolved, replaced by images and sensations that were not his own. He was a child running through crystalline gardens, feeling the overwhelming weight of expectation. He was an adolescent standing before the ancestral flame during a sacred initiation, understanding for the first time the deep isolation that came with royal blood. He was Ariana watching her mother's funeral, the burden of an empire settling onto her shoulders as the funeral pyre burned. Emotions that were not his own crashed through him. Determination, profound loneliness, fierce intelligence constrained by tradition, and a desperate, profound hope that her world could evolve without sacrificing what made it sacred. When reality abruptly returned, Elias found himself on his knees in the corridor, Ariana similarly positioned across from him. Her eyes were wide, filled with the same raw shock he felt. You, she began, her voice unsteady. The settlement on Riel, you defied orders to rescue those refugees. Elias swallowed hard, knowing precisely which memory she had just witnessed. His most defining, combined act of both failure and conscience. Indeed, you willingly sacrificed those lives over your career, over your entire future. It wasn't a question demanding confirmation but a statement of sudden understanding. I was unable to abandon them to perish. That simple, stark truth was what had professionally ruined him. Around them, court officials and palace guards were quickly gathering, alarmed by their unexpected collapse. Ariana swiftly regained her composure, rising to her feet with practiced royal poise. A momentary lapse due to my recent ordeal, she announced smoothly. The human's injury appears to have partially reopened. It was a convenient, quickly improvised excuse that permitted them to retreat from public scrutiny, escorted by guards to Ariana's private residential chambers. Once they were alone, she turned to him, her expression profoundly altered by the memory she had just witnessed. You were penalized for saving lives, she stated, still grappling with the notion. On Varelia, such an honorable act would be celebrated, not condemned. Earth's military holds a different perspective on honor, Elias replied, himself still unsettled by the influx of her experienced memories. Obeying orders is paramount, even when those directives conflict with. He struggled to find the appropriate phrasing. With the intrinsic value of life itself, she finished for him. I comprehend now why the Bond selected you. There is a deep resonance between us. Elias looked at her with an emerging, new understanding. Your reforms, they aren't merely political maneuvering. You genuinely believe your people need fundamental change, just as you believe those refugees had to be saved, regardless of the personal cost to yourself. She walked toward a wide window that overlooked the capital city, its soaring spires gleaming in the light of the setting suns. The Darth Bond never errs, Lieutenant Cade. It has always been our most sacred article of faith that those joined by the spilling of blood and sacrifice are joined for a specific purpose. What purpose could possibly be served by linking our two very different lives? Elias asked, the daunting reality of their situation once again settling over him like an immense weight. Ariana turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of genuine hope in her expression. Perhaps the purpose is to forge a bridge between our two worlds, a connection that cannot be easily broken. The bond has never formed between a Varelia and an outsider before. That fact alone fundamentally alters everything we assumed we understood about our ancestral covenants. Elias wasn't sure if he should feel honored or utterly trapped by this extraordinary distinction. What is the next step concerning the memory sharing? It will continue intermittently over the next few days, she explained. We possess no control over when or where it manifests, which is why you must remain in close proximity to me. If we are separated during an episode, what then? He prompted when she hesitated. The consequences can be disorienting, painful even. The bond actively seeks proximity during its developmental stages. Elias considered this new complication. So, I am genuinely to be your bound protector then, accompanying you everywhere? For the immediate future, she agreed. Until the bond either stabilizes or completes its required cycle. And how many phases remain? 3, she confirmed. Following memory sharing comes the protection phase, where the bond physically mandates proximity and intensely heightens protective instincts. Then, unification, where our minds can communicate entirely without language. Finally, if the bond is fully accepted by both participants, there is completion, a permanent linking that allows for shared strength, healing, and awareness regardless of distance. Elias attempted to conceptualize being permanently connected to another being in such a profound and intimate manner. The idea was simultaneously alluring and deeply terrifying. And if we fail to achieve completion? He inquired. Then we remain fixed in whatever phase we have reached, with its respective limitations and demands until death. Her expression turned deeply solemn. There is no means of severing the Darth Bond once it has been initiated, Elias. The only release is death, and due to the inherent nature of the connection, the death of one invariably often leads to the death of the other. The implication was painfully clear. Their futures were now irrevocably bound whether they desired it or not. Your Earth ambassador seems quite distressed by these developments, Ariana noted, subtly shifting the subject. He has repeatedly requested your immediate return to the embassy. I'm not surprised, Elias replied. This is entirely unprecedented territory for human diplomacy. Do you wish to return to your people? She asked, her tone deliberately neutral. Elias weighed the question. His logical mind screamed yes. He desperately needed to report to his superiors, undergo examination by human doctors, and find some verifiable means to either authenticate or potentially counteract Ariana's claims about the bond. But another part of him, growing stronger every hour, recoiled fiercely at the very thought of separation from her. I need to at least establish communication with them, he finally answered. They will demand a comprehensive understanding of what is occurring. Of course, she agreed. I shall organize a secure communication link. But, Elias, her use of his first name caught his attention immediately. Exercise caution regarding how much you disclose. There are powerful factions within my court who would regard this bond as a sheer abomination, a corruption of our most sacred tradition. If they conclude I am permanently bound to you, they might decide you are unfit to rule, he concluded, recognizing the dire political ramifications. Ariana nodded grimly. Or even worse, they might conclude that eliminating you would effectively liberate me from the contamination of human influence. The Darth Bond is supposed to be a divine blessing, a sacred connection. Historically, it has only ever formed between Vareilians of noble lineage. This unforeseen deviation will cause intense fear among many who rigidly adhere to the old ways. Like High Counselor Axon, Elias observed. Especially Axon, she confirmed. He has spent decades meticulously cultivating influence over my father and positioning his own nephew as a potential consort for me. Your unexpected presence threatens everything he has worked to achieve. The political landscape was rapidly becoming clearer, and Elias found the view deeply unsettling. He was not simply trapped within an alien cultural tradition. He had become an unwitting catalyst in what appeared to be a complex, high-stakes power struggle for the entire future of Varelia itself. So, I am either your divinely appointed protector or a corrupting alien influence, he summarized wryly. Depending on which faction is doing the talking. Welcome to Varelian court politics, Lieutenant, Ariana responded with the faintest trace of a smile. Where destiny and conspiracy are often indistinguishable from one another. In the subsequent days, Elias experienced further instances of memory exchange with Ariana, sometimes fleeting impressions, at other times prolonged sequences that left him mentally depleted and emotionally exposed. He witnessed her childhood confinement within the palace walls, her secret, forbidden studies of Earth culture against her tutor's explicit warnings, and her escalating determination to overturn her society's isolationist policy. In return, she experienced his rigorous military training, the intense deployments, the deep camaraderie within his unit, and the crushing emotional weight of the Riel incident that had irrevocably destroyed his career. These involuntary exchanges fostered an intense intimacy between them that transcended any normal human or Vareilian connection. Elias found himself instinctively grasping Ariana's subtle expressions, anticipating her thoughts, and feeling a growing sense of protectiveness that went far beyond mere duty or obligation. The protection phase is drawing near, Ariana explained during one of their private conversations in the palace gardens, one of the few places they could speak without being overheard by court personnel. You will begin to sense threats to my safety much more acutely, and the bond will induce physical discomfort if we are separated. How much discomfort are we talking about? Elias asked, watching the strange, bioluminescent flora surrounding them sway in the soft breeze. It varies widely, depending on the strength of the bond and the individuals involved, she admitted. For some historical pairings, separation merely resulted in anxiety or restlessness. For others, she hesitated. For others, the pain was debilitating. Elias absorbed this information with escalating concern. His standing within the palace remained extremely precarious. The emperor merely tolerated his presence because Ariana had successfully framed it as a temporary diplomatic courtesy and a fleeting arrangement of gratitude. If the full truth of the Darth Bond were to become known, or if the protection phase manifested as powerfully as Ariana suggested, their painstakingly constructed fiction would instantly shatter. Your father must suspect something, he observed. I have been at your side almost constantly for over a week now. He believes I am simply honoring the life debt our culture demands, she replied. A temporary arrangement of gratitude before your inevitable return to Earth. He does not know, cannot know, the true depth of what has occurred. Their discussion was suddenly interrupted by the approach of a Varelia female clad in the distinctive armor of the Royal Guard. Unlike the ceremonial sentinels who merely stood watch, this guard moved with the practiced efficacy of a true hardened warrior. Your Highness, she said, bowing formally to Ariana. The Emperor requires your presence in the council chamber immediately. Ariana's expression remained perfectly neutral, yet Elias felt a distinct surge of anxiety through their strengthening bond. Did my father indicate the nature of this summons, Riva? No, Your Highness, the guard replied. Only that it pertains to matters of succession and tradition. Elias and Ariana exchanged a look of shared concern. Those specific terms, succession and tradition, had been the consistent rallying cry of the conservative faction led by Axon. We shall attend him at once, Ariana declared, rising gracefully from her seat. As they followed Riva through the palace corridors, Elias noted the guard casting curious glances his way. Unlike most Verlians, her gaze held no hint of disgust or suspicion, only thoughtful, professional assessment. Commander Riva leads my personal security detail, Ariana explained quietly. She has served my family for 3 generations and possesses more battlefield experience than most of our military command. 3 generations? Elias questioned, studying the guard, who appeared to be in her physical prime. Verlians possess significantly longer lifespans than humans, Ariana reminded him. Riva has witnessed 270 cycles of our moons. Before Elias could fully process this fact, they reached the council chamber, a circular room dominated by a massive table carved from the same bioluminescent wood as the Emperor's throne. Seated around it were the 12 high counselors, with Emperor Valerian at the head and Axon positioned strategically at his right hand. Daughter, the Emperor acknowledged as they entered. And Lieutenant Cade, his noticeable hesitation before Elias's name spoke volumes of unspoken tension. You summoned us, Father, Ariana replied with formal deference, taking her designated seat at the table. Elias remained standing formally behind her chair, as was appropriate for a guard rather than a council member. The council has been engaged in discussion on matters of grave importance to the future security of our empire, Valerian began, his tone deliberately measured. High Counselor Axon has voiced serious misgivings regarding the continuity of the royal succession and the necessary safeguarding of our most sacred bloodlines. Axon's thin mouth curled into what could barely be considered an attempt at a smile. Your Highness, we have observed with mounting concern your extended association with the human officer. While a gesture of gratitude for his intervention is entirely proper, the prolonged nature of this arrangement generates legitimate questions concerning adherence to our most fundamental traditions. Lieutenant Cade serves as my honored guard while he recuperates from the injuries he sustained in my defense, Ariana countered smoothly. This entirely aligns with our traditions of honoring life debts. Indeed, Axon agreed with a carefully manufactured pleasantness. However, tradition also mandates that such arrangements must be both transient and largely ceremonial. The lieutenant has been constantly present at your side, even during high matters of state and private audiences. This significantly exceeds established traditional boundaries. Elias sensed a wave of tension emanating from Ariana, though her facial expression remained completely controlled. Furthermore, Axon pressed on, the time is now ripe to address your future, Princess. As the sole heir to the eternal throne, your marriage and the continuation of the royal bloodline cannot be postponed indefinitely. The council officially proposes that formal courtship rituals commence immediately with suitable noble candidates selected from the ancient houses. And there it was, the genuine underlying purpose of this carefully orchestrated meeting. Axon was making a decisive move to secure Ariana's marriage to a conservative nobleman, most likely his own nephew, before her reform initiatives could gain significant influence. "I am honored by the Council's concern for our bloodlines," Ariana responded with diplomatic composure. "However, my focus must remain on the modernization programs that are essential to secure Varelia's place in the rapidly evolving galactic environment. Matrimonial considerations can wait until these crucial matters are successfully addressed." Axon's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "With all respect, Princess, tradition requires that the security of the bloodline must take precedence over policy initiatives, particularly those experimental measures involving increased contact with outsiders." The deliberate way he pronounced the word outsiders, while glancing pointedly at Elias, made it sound like a virulent contagion. "The princess has demonstrated significant wisdom in her reform proposals," another counselor interjected, an older female with intricate silver patterns etched around her eyes. "Perhaps tradition can accommodate a certain degree of innovation without compromising its core principles." A ripple of mixed reactions, both agreement and protest, moved through the council members. Elias observed the evident division among them, mentally tallying who appeared to support Ariana and who aligned themselves with Axon. "Innovation is welcome only when it genuinely strengthens our populace," Axon countered. "But certain traditions are immutable because they preserve the very fundamental essence of what defines us as Verlian. The sacred bloodlines, the ancestral bonds, these cannot be jeopardized without risking our identity as a civilization." Emperor Valerian, who had been listening in silence, finally intervened. "Both viewpoints possess merit. My daughter's vision for our future exhibits foresight. Yet, Councillor Axon's deep concern for our traditions is equally valid. We must find a course that honors both." Perhaps, Axon suggested with unsettling smoothness, the princess might choose to demonstrate her profound respect for tradition by participating in the celestial purification ritual during the approaching alignment of our moons. Such a public reaffirmation of our ancestral ways would greatly reassure those concerned about her more progressive tendencies. Elias felt a sharp spike of alarm transmitted from Ariana at the mere mention of this ritual, though her external composure remained flawless. "The purification is an ancient and sacred ceremony," she acknowledged. "I would naturally require time to prepare appropriately for such an undertaking." Naturally, Axon agreed with false generosity. 3 days should be adequate. The celestial alignment commences then, and the ritual must be conducted precisely at its peak moment. The Emperor nodded in definitive agreement. "It is therefore decided. Ariana will undergo the purification, and immediately afterward, we shall revisit the issue of courtship and succession planning." As the council session was formally concluded and they withdrew, Elias waited until they were in a completely private corridor before directly questioning Ariana. "What is this purification ritual, and why did its mention cause you such concern?" Her expression was troubled as she guided him into a secluded alcove. "It is one of our most ancient ceremonies, a ritualistic cleansing intended to purge external influences and restore a Verlian's deep connection to their ancestral essence. It demands isolation within the sacred temples, fasting, deep meditation, and exposure to specific substances that enhance the connection to our genetic memory." "That does not sound inherently sinister," Elias observed cautiously. "In itself it is not," she conceded. "But Axon's forceful insistence on this specific ritual at this specific moment is highly suspicious. The purification is known to temporarily disrupt unusual energy patterns within the body." Understanding dawned on Elias. He suspects the Darth Bond. "Or he merely intends to separate us for a sufficient duration to test his theory," she confirmed. "The ritual absolutely requires absolute isolation. No guards, no attendants. Only the temple priestesses are permitted contact with the supplicant." "And if we are forcibly separated during the protection phase?" Elias prompted, not needing to complete the thought. They both fully understood the potentially catastrophic consequences. "Precisely," Ariana said grimly. "If the bond has progressed to the extent I believe it has, the separation could induce severe distress, perhaps enough to expose the truth of our connection to every person present." Elias considered their limited options. "Could you simply refuse the ritual?" "Not without provoking even greater suspicion and potentially directly offending my father," she replied. "The Emperor's suggestion is essentially a non-negotiable command." "Then we require a contingency plan," Elias decided. "A method for me to remain close enough to maintain the bond without overtly violating the ritual's strict isolation requirements." Ariana looked thoughtful. The sacred temples are situated in the Hill of Ancestors, several miles away from the palace. They are ancient structures, parts of which predate even our written historical records. There may be a possibility. Their planning was interrupted by the approach of Commander Riva, who bowed formally before speaking in a hushed voice. Your Highness, I must speak with you urgently regarding the security arrangements for the purification ceremony. Ariana nodded. Of course, Commander, please accompany us to my chambers where we can discuss this in complete privacy. Once they were securely inside Ariana's private quarters, Riva's demeanor shifted subtly, her formal rigidity yielding to what appeared to be genuine professional concern. Princess, I must strongly advise against participating in this ritual under the current circumstances, she stated bluntly. There are irregularities in the Council's preparations that deeply worry me. What nature of irregularities? Elias asked directly. Riva gave him a sharp, appraising look before answering. High Counselor Axon has personally selected the priestesses who will conduct the ceremony. All of them hail from noble houses aligned with his political faction. This is highly irregular. Traditionally, the temple elders choose based purely on spiritual qualifications, not political affiliations. Is there any known precedent for this manipulation? Ariana inquired. None in recent memory, Riva confirmed. Furthermore, Axon has ordered his personal guard to secure the temple perimeter instead of the royal sentinels who would ordinarily perform this duty. The implications were chillingly clear. Axon was systematically creating conditions where he would have absolute, unsupervised control over Ariana during the ritual, with no loyalist nearby to intervene if events took a turn for the worse. He is isolating you, Elias concluded, cutting you off from anyone who might interrupt whatever scheme he is planning. Ariana's expression hardened with unwavering resolve. Then we must ensure his plan fails. Commander Riva, I need to know if there is anyone among the temple staff who remains loyal to the crown above the council. Elder Sonai served your mother and strictly maintains the old ways, Riva replied without hesitation. She holds no affection for Axon's political intrusion into sacred spaces. Can you deliver a message to her without arousing any suspicion? Riva nodded. I can, Your Highness. Good. Inform her that I require information regarding the ancient passages beneath the Hill of Ancestors, specifically any that connect directly to the purification chamber. Ariana turned to Elias. The temples were constructed above an extensive network of cave systems that our ancestors utilized for various hidden purposes. If these passages are still intact, I could remain close enough to sustain the bond without being detected. Precisely, Elias finished, immediately grasping her plan. She turned back to Riva. Commander, what I am about to disclose must remain absolutely confidential, even from your most trusted subordinate officers. Riva drew herself up, her expression solemn. I am bound by blood oath to your lineage, Princess. Your secrets are mine to protect with my life. Ariana took a deep, steadying breath. Lieutenant Cade and I are connected by a Darth Bond. It was activated when he successfully intercepted the assassination attempt. To her immense credit, Riva's only visible reaction was a slight, brief widening of her eyes. A Darth Bond with a human? That is unprecedented and potentially catastrophic if Axon discovers it before I can secure my political position, Ariana confirmed. The bond is progressing rapidly. We believe it will soon enter the protection phase, rendering separation physically perilous for us both. The timing of this purification ritual is not a coincidence. Then Riva concluded Axon must already suspect something. Or he is deliberately creating circumstances that will force the truth to reveal itself, Elias suggested. Either way, we require a solution that keeps me in close proximity to Ariana without violating the ritual's rigid protocols. Riva considered the challenge with the tactical acuity of a seasoned commander. The passages beneath the temples might work, but they have not been utilized in generations. They could be collapsed or heavily guarded by ancient security mechanisms. What manner of security mechanisms? Elias asked. Our ancestors were highly creative in their protections, Riva replied cryptically. Biological, mechanical, sometimes combining elements of both. Many of their precise methods have been lost to the passage of time. We have only 3 days to prepare, Ariana said, refocusing the conversation on immediate necessities. Riva, contact Elder Sonai as swiftly as possible. We need detailed maps of those passages and any information regarding remaining security systems. And I need to understand exactly what this purification ritual involves, Elias added. The specific procedures, the timing, everything so we can identify when you will be most vulnerable. Ariana nodded in firm agreement. I will provide every detail I know about the ritual, but we must also anticipate the possibility that Axon has altered the traditional procedures to suit his own ends. One final thing, Riva interjected. If you genuinely share a Darth Bond, then according to the ancient texts, you should be developing certain innate abilities. Enhanced awareness of each other's presence, emotional states, perhaps even thoughts. We have experienced memory sharing, Ariana confirmed. Then utilize it, Riva advised. The bond itself may prove to be your greatest asset if Axon attempts to harm either of you. In the historical records, bonded pairs could draw vital strength from one another, share sensory information, and even temporarily access each other's physical capabilities in moments of extreme danger. Elias and Ariana exchanged looks of intense surprise. Neither had seriously considered that the bond might provide tactical advantages rather than just overwhelming complications. The next 3 days are absolutely crucial, Riva continued. You must strengthen your connection as intensely as possible before the inevitable separation. The ancient narratives suggest that bonded pairs would prepare for potential separation through a ritualistic process, something akin to soul anchoring in your language. And how exactly does one anchor a soul? Elias inquired, slightly uneasy with the metaphysical terminology. Through shared experience, highly focused intention, and strict physical proximity, Riva explained. The specific practices vary across different historical accounts, but the underlying principle remains constant. The more robust the connection forged before separation, the more resilient it becomes during forced absence. Ariana appeared thoughtful. My mother once mentioned the existence of ancient bonded guardians who could maintain their powerful connection across vast distances through such practices. I had dismissed it as merely folklore. Many legends have their deep roots in factual events, Your Highness, Riva countered, particularly those concerning the Darth Bond. As they continued their intensive planning, Elias felt the gravity of their predicament settle over him. What had started as a straightforward diplomatic assignment had rapidly escalated into a life-altering link with an alien princess and placed him squarely at the epicenter of an interplanetary political crisis. Yet, beneath the layers of complexity and genuine danger, he sensed something else emerging, a sense of purpose, a connection that transcended cultural divisions, and perhaps offered something profound he had been missing since his professional disgrace in Earth's military, a cause truly worthy of fighting for. The 3 days leading up to the purification ritual vanished in a flurry of intense preparation, deliberate secrecy, and increasingly vivid bond experiences. Elder Sonai, through coded messages delivered by Riva, successfully provided ancient, fragmentary maps of the temple complex, which included the long-forgotten passages beneath the purification chamber. These maps were rendered in an archaic form of the Varelia language, necessitating that Ariana personally undertake the delicate translation process to prevent alerting potentially untrustworthy scholars. Concurrently, Elias and Ariana dedicated themselves completely to fortifying their bond via the soul anchoring process Riva had detailed. They spent long hours in continuous proximity, voluntarily sharing deep personal memories rather than passively waiting for the bond to trigger exchanges, and rigorously practicing a focused awareness of each other's evolving emotional states. I can sense your constant state of vigilance, Ariana commented during one of these intimate sessions. They were seated cross-legged, facing each other in her private meditation chamber, the atmosphere dense with aromatic incense that aided Varelians in concentrating their mental energies. It never truly ceases even when you appear calm, Elias explained. Military training becomes pure instinct over time. I am perpetually scanning for threats, calculating potential exit routes, assessing any possible weapons in the immediate environment. It must be utterly exhausting to exist in such a constant state of readiness, she observed. Elias considered this assessment. I have never truly viewed it in that light. It is simply my default mode. I sense something deeper beneath that exterior, though, she continued, her violet eyes studying him with an unsettling, accurate perception. A fundamental restlessness, as though you are seeking something that remains just out of reach. The piercing accuracy of her observation momentarily unsettled him. The bond is simply getting much stronger, he deflected. Yes, she agreed, allowing him the subject change. I can now feel your presence even when we are in separate rooms, like a profound warmth at the very edge of my consciousness. For me, it is more like a sustained musical note humming continually in the background, Elias attempted to articulate. I always know precisely which direction to find you and exactly how far away you are. These advancements both intrigued and deeply alarmed him. The bond was rapidly evolving into something far beyond the mere biological connection Ariana had initially described. It was fundamentally reshaping his perception of reality itself. On the evening preceding the ritual, Commander Riva delivered the final, conclusive confirmation of their suspicions. Axon had indeed modified the traditional purification ceremony. The ritual typically involves deep meditation, ritualistic fasting and controlled exposure to ancestral memory stones, she reported in Ariana's chambers. However, Axon has introduced a specific additional element, an ancient elixir known as Vosanti, which supposedly enhances the connection to ancestral memories. Vosanti has been banned from ceremonies for 3 centuries, Ariana exclaimed with genuine alarm. It was discontinued because it rendered the supplicants completely suggestible while under its influence. Mind control, Elias translated grimly. Essentially yes, she confirmed. It forcibly opens neural pathways typically reserved only for ancestral memory, making the mind extremely vulnerable to external suggestion, which it then interprets as the undisputed voice of the ancestors. The perfect opportunity for Axon to subtly plant ideas that advance his own agenda, Riva concluded. Elias began to pace the room, mentally processing this new, significant threat. So, he is not only trying to separate us to force the exposure of the bond, but he is also planning to brainwash you while you are isolated. It appears so, Ariana conceded. Though brainwash isn't technically accurate. Vosanti creates a temporary state where ancestral authority is severely magnified. If Axon presents his political suggestions as the explicit will of my ancestors, my culturally ingrained respect for their wisdom would render resistance extremely difficult. Can you simply refuse to drink it? Elias asked. Refusing any element of the purification once it has formally commenced would be seen as an immediate rejection of our most sacred traditions, she explained. That would provide Axon with precisely the ammunition he requires to declare me officially unfit for succession. Riva interjected with a critical tactical observation. There might be a single alternative. The temple passages that Elder Sonai identified include one that emerges into a small, unseen chamber behind the ceremonial wall of the purification room. Historically, temple guardians utilized this hidden position to observe the rituals and ensure that the proper procedures were strictly followed. So, I could potentially interrupt if things escalate badly, Elias suggested. Yes, but the timing would be absolutely crucial, Riva cautioned. Interrupting too prematurely would expose your presence without sufficient justification. Interrupting too late, and whatever Axon has planned might already have taken permanent effect. We require a signal, Ariana decided. Something that will clearly inform you exactly when intervention is unavoidable. The bond itself could provide that, Elias suggested. If you are in genuine, imminent distress, I should be able to sense it now. Ariana nodded in firm agreement. And I will attempt to project a specific thought pattern. If I detect any manipulation or direct danger, I will project the memory of the assassination attempt. It is vivid enough in both our minds to be instantly recognizable through the bond. As they finalized the remaining details of their plan, Elias felt the bond between them pulse with a new, sharp intensity. The protection phase was now fully manifesting, creating an almost tangible sensation of connection, like an invisible, powerful tether linking them physically together. Remember, Riva advised as they concluded their preparations. The temple passages are ancient and may contain defenses specifically designed to keep outsiders away from sacred chambers. Move with extreme caution and respect any symbols or markings you encounter. Our ancestors believed in safeguarding sacred spaces both physically and spiritually. I will remember, Elias promised, though he privately wondered how he would possibly recognize ancient Verlian security measures, let alone effectively circumvent them. As if sensing his sudden unease, Ariana reached out and gently took his hand, the contact sending an immediate wave of reassuring warmth through the bond. Trust in the connection we have built these past days, she said softly. The bond will guide you when your knowledge fails. On the night before the scheduled ritual, as Elias attempted to rest in preparation for the severe challenges ahead, he experienced the most vivid memory exchange yet, not a fractured glimpse, but a complete immersion in Ariana's past. He found himself standing in a vast ceremonial hall as a much younger Ariana, watching her mother, Queen Sarella, address the full royal council. The Queen's passionate advocacy for cautious engagement with the wider galactic community was met with sharp resistance from younger versions of the faces he now recognized, including Axon, who was already positioned as a loud voice for isolationist tradition. In the memory, Ariana felt simultaneously inspired by her mother's vision and utterly terrified by the opposition it relentlessly generated. When the council session concluded, she followed her mother to a private garden, where the Queen knelt down to her daughter's level. Remember, Ariana, Queen Sarella said, her voice resonant with unwavering conviction. Tradition exists to guide us, not to imprison us. The greatest honor we can ever show our ancestors is not blind obedience to their ways, but possessing the courage to adapt their wisdom to new challenges they could never have foreseen. The memory then shifted to a later time, the Queen's death chamber. Ariana stood numbly beside her mother's bed as the royal physicians withdrew, their somber expressions confirming what everyone already knew. The mysterious illness had progressed far beyond the reach of treatment. Emperor Valerian sat utterly broken beside his wife, his usual imperial composure completely shattered by overwhelming grief. "Promise me," the dying queen whispered to Ariana. "Promise you will continue what I began. Varelia cannot remain isolated forever. Change must arrive, but it must arrive with deep respect for who we have always been." "I promise, mother," the young princess vowed, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. "And you," the queen then turned her fading gaze to her husband, "must protect her when I am gone. There are those who would rather see our royal line utterly extinguished than permit the inevitable changes that must occur." The emperor's heartbroken response was lost as the memory began to swiftly fade, but the raw emotion fiercely lingered. Grief intertwined with unwavering purpose, a daughter's heartfelt promise becoming the definitive mission of her life. When Elias awoke, he found his face wet with tears that were not his own. The bond had shared not just the memory, but the raw, overwhelming emotion attached to it. He understood now, on a profound visceral level, exactly what was the driving force behind Ariana's reforms. This was not mere political ambition or abstract idealism. It was a sacred vow to a dying mother and an absolute, genuine belief that her people's very survival hinged upon carefully managed evolution. The revelation left him with an intensely renewed sense of purpose as dawn broke on the day of the purification ritual. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever dark scheme Axon had engineered, Elias was now fighting not merely for Ariana's safety or his own self-preservation, but for the fulfillment of a promise and the entire future of a civilization delicately poised between its ancient tradition and its necessary evolution. The Temple of Ancestral Purification stood majestically atop the highest point of the Hill of Ancestors, its ancient stone architecture gleaming with embedded minerals that brilliantly caught the morning light. In stark contrast to the more modernized structures of the capital city, the temple appeared virtually unaltered from the time of its construction millennia earlier, a powerful physical manifestation of Varelia tradition's resistance to change. Elias watched from a carefully concealed position as Ariana's lone processional approached the temple steps. She walked entirely alone, robed in ceremonial white, embroidered with her family sigils, her normally free-flowing hair bound in intricate braids that symbolized submission to ancestral authority. Trailing her at a respectful distance came Emperor Valerian and the council members, including Axon, whose look of sheer satisfaction sent a deep chill through Elias despite the morning warmth. The inevitable separation was already beginning to affect them both. Elias felt a persistent discomfort, not quite pain, but a deep sense of wrongness that grew sharper with every step Ariana took away from him. Through their strengthened bond, he sensed her experiencing the exact same sensation, though her face remained perfectly impassive to the observers. Once Ariana had vanished inside the temple with the ceremonial escort, Elias quickly made his way towards the hidden entrance Elder Sonai had identified on the ancient maps. It was situated within a seemingly solid rock face at the base of the hill, expertly disguised by natural formations and visible only if one knew the precise spot to look. The mechanism for entry was ingenious in its elegant simplicity, a series of carved handholds that, when pressed in the correct, memorized sequence, triggered a massive stone panel to slide quietly sideways. Elias followed the pattern he had committed to memory and was rewarded with the soft grinding sound of stone against stone as a narrow passage opened before him. The tunnel beyond was pitch dark and low-ceilinged, forcing him to crouch low as he proceeded. He activated a small, shielded light source to maintain darkness and began his journey through Varelia's ancient history. The passage walls were covered with elaborate carvings depicting historical events, religious rites, and what appeared to be instructions or warnings rendered in an archaic form of Varelian script. Elias moved with intense caution, constantly mindful of Riva's warnings about ancient defenses. His prudence proved necessary when, after several minutes of progress, he encountered the first security measure, a section of the floor that was subtly but distinctly different in color from the surrounding stone. Consulting the maps in his mind, he recognized this as a pressure plate that would trigger some unknown mechanism if stepped upon. Pressing himself tightly against the wall, Elias carefully edged past the dangerous section, only to immediately find himself facing a far more complex challenge. A small chamber where the entire floor was composed of similar pressure plates, leaving no clearly visible safe path across. He paused, rapidly considering his limited options. Retreating was not a viable choice, not with Ariana moving deeper into the temple complex above him. The discomfort from their forced separation was steadily intensifying, and through the bond, he acutely sensed that she had already commenced the preliminary stages of the ritual. Examining the chamber floor more closely, Elias noted various symbols carved above each pressure plate, all variations of the same ancestral markings he had observed throughout the palace. Some carvings appeared noticeably more worn than others, suggesting they had been stepped on more frequently. A memory suddenly flickered through the bond, Ariana as a young child learning about the sacred symbols of her lineage. The most important ancestral markers were touched with deep reverence during ceremonies, while markers for lesser bloodlines were acknowledged but not directly engaged with. Understanding dawned, the safe path must follow the hierarchy of Ariana's direct ancestral line. Focusing intently on the symbols, Elias swiftly identified the markers representing her family's primary lineage and carefully stepped only on those specific plates. He made it approximately halfway across the chamber before a slight misstep sent a sharp tremor through the entire structure. Freezing instantly, he felt, rather than heard, ancient machinery activating somewhere deep within the walls. A section of the ceiling began to gradually lower, threatening to crush him if he remained stationary. Abandoning all caution, Elias plunged forward, guided purely by his instinct and the faint directional pull of the bond. He reached the far side of the chamber just as the ceiling descended completely, violently sealing the room behind him. Breathing heavily, he continued onward, now being guided as much by his deep connection to Ariana as by the memorized maps. The discomfort of their separation had now escalated into a dull, persistent ache centered in his chest, precisely where the ceremonial dagger had struck him weeks earlier. Through the bond, he sensed Ariana's growing apprehension as she progressed through the ritual's opening phases. The temple priestesses, Axon's carefully selected loyalists, were directing her through initial purifications involving water, smoke, and chanted invocations. Soon they would reach the crucial moment when the Vosanti elixir would be administered. Elias quickened his pace, successfully navigating two more security measures, a section where specific hand patterns needed to be pressed into the wall in sequence, and a narrow bridge spanning over what appeared to be a bottomless chasm. The latter challenge severely tested his resolve as the ancient stone creaked alarmingly beneath his weight. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely less than one, he reached the hidden observation chamber positioned directly behind the purification room. A small, flawlessly crafted opening in the stone wall allowed limited visual access while remaining essentially invisible from the other side. Peering through, Elias saw Ariana kneeling in the center of a circular room. She was surrounded by 7 priestesses in elaborate ceremonial attire, each clutching a different ritual implement. Behind them, seated in specially designated alcoves, were Emperor Valerian and the council members, their positions deliberately elevating them above the ceremony to witness it. Axon sat closest to the Emperor, occasionally leaning toward him to whisper comments that Valerian acknowledged with subtle nods. The counselor's expression remained outwardly pious, but Elias clearly detected an undercurrent of sharp anticipation that confirmed their deepest suspicions regarding his true intentions. The lead priestess, a severe-looking woman with extensive facial markings, approached Ariana, carrying an ornate chalice that emitted faint wisps of greenish vapor. The Vosanti elixir had been prepared. Through their bond, Elias felt Ariana's firm determination mingled with intense apprehension. She knew exactly what was coming and had mentally prepared herself as best as possible, but the Vosanti's profound effects were known to be powerful and largely unavoidable. Princess Ariana Virilan Solaris, the priestess intoned, her voice carrying the weighty authority of centuries of tradition. This sacred elixir will utterly clear your mind of all external influences and open your consciousness to the boundless wisdom of your ancestors. Drink and be purified. As Ariana accepted the chalice, Elias felt her project a clear, mental thought toward him. I will resist as long as possible. Be ready. She drank and the effect was almost instantaneous. Through their bond, Elias experienced a wildly disorienting surge as Ariana's consciousness simultaneously expanded and fragmented. Colors became unnaturally vivid, sounds were heavily textured, and time itself seemed to flow erratically. Most significantly, her mental barriers thinned drastically, leaving her thoughts exposed and highly malleable. The priestesses immediately began a rhythmic, low chant, guiding Ariana deeper into the trance state. She swayed slightly, her eyes unfocused, as deep ancestral memories began to surface. Generations of rulers confronting great challenges, making monumental decisions, rigidly upholding sacred traditions. Then, as the chanting reached its peak crescendo, the lead priestess moved in close to Ariana and began speaking in a much lower tone that would not carry to the observing nobles. "Hear the wisdom of your ancestors, princess," she murmured. "They speak through me now. The path you have chosen is utterly false. Your reforms threaten the purity of our bloodlines and the essential stability of our society. External influences have corrupted your judgment." Through the bond, Elias felt Ariana desperately struggling to maintain her sense of self against these insidious suggestions. The Vosanti caused the priestess's words to resonate with an artificial authority, as though they truly originated from revered ancestors rather than Axon's calculated political agenda. "Your mother was misguided," the priestess continued, deliberately striking at Ariana's core motivation. "Her vision would have inevitably destroyed everything our people have painstakingly built. Your father knows this truth but has been tragically weakened by grief. You must abandon her chosen path and immediately revert to the traditional ways." Elias sensed Ariana's mental resistance rapidly wavering as the elixir's influence deepened. The false ancestral voices were becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish from genuine memory, the suggested doubts blending seamlessly with her own subconscious fears. "The human who saved you is a dangerous anomaly, a disruption in the sacred order," the priestess added, moving to the ultimate purpose of this manipulation. "His continued presence pollutes our court and tragically threatens our genetic purity. You must sever all connections to him and pledge yourself to a proper Verlian union." At this direct, forceful attack on their sacred bond, Elias felt a raw surge of protective anger rise up within him. The powerful sensation flooded through their deep connection, giving Ariana a much-needed, momentary anchor against the swirling, disorienting influences of the Vosanti. The lead priestess frowned, sensing the unexpected, sudden resistance. She gestured sharply to her colleagues, who instantly intensified their rhythmic chanting while she continued her subversive whispers. "The human has formed an unnatural attachment to you," she suggested. "This is the source of the conflict you feel. His alien influence must be entirely purged from your mind and body. You will request his immediate return to Earth upon the completion of this ceremony." Elias watched Axon lean forward in his observation alcove, clearly recognizing that the crucial moment for his scheme had arrived. The counselor made a subtle hand signal to the priestess, who nodded almost imperceptibly before producing a small crystal vial filled with a luminescent blue liquid. This was not part of the traditional ritual. Through their bond, Elias sensed Ariana's immediate, momentary confusion cutting through the Vosanti's powerful effects. "To complete your purification," the priestess announced, speaking loudly enough for all observers to clearly hear, "you must cleanse your blood of any foreign elements. This sacred essence will burn away all external influences and fully restore your pure Verlian nature." Ariana's sharp alarm sliced through the bond like a knife. "This is not part of the ritual. It's poison or worse." Elias did not hesitate for a second. He pressed the specific sequence Elder Sonai had described onto the observation wall, causing a hidden door to violently swing inward. In 3 long, powerful strides, he was physically inside the purification chamber, interrupting the sacred ceremony in a way that no outsider had ever before dared. "Stop," he commanded, his voice echoing fiercely off the ancient stones. Gasps and shouts of outrage erupted from the observing counselors. The Emperor instantly rose to his feet, his expression a volatile mixture of shock and sheer fury. The priestesses froze in place, the lead one still clutching the suspicious vial. "This is sacrilege," Axon thundered, pointing an accusing finger directly at Elias. "The human defile our most sacred ritual." Elias ignored him, focusing his entire attention on Ariana, who was desperately struggling to break free of the Vosanti's powerful influence. Through their bond, he forcibly projected clarity and immense strength, helping her fight through the elixir's residual effects. "That vial contains no purification essence," Elias declared, addressing the Emperor directly. "It is a deliberate poison intended to harm the princess while attempting to make it appear as an appropriate part of the ritual." "Preposterous," Axon sputtered. "This human has clearly lost his mind. Guards, remove him immediately." Temple guards began moving toward Elias, but he stood his ground firmly. "Test the substance," he challenged. "If I am incorrect, I will accept any punishment your laws demand." Emperor Valerian raised a single hand, instantly halting the guard's advance. Despite his obvious, building anger at the interruption, the Emperor's deep concern for his daughter temporarily overrode his outrage. "Explain yourself, human," he commanded. "The purification ritual has been corrupted," Elias stated firmly. High Counselor Axon specifically selected these priestesses because they are solely loyal to him, not to the crown. The additional substance they attempted to administer is demonstrably not part of the traditional ceremony. The lead priestess finally found her voice. This is a sacred purifying essence used in ancient times. Then you won't object to drinking it yourself, Elias interrupted, his tone leaving absolutely no room for argument. The priestess blanched instinctively, clutching the vial closer to her robes, a telling reaction that did not go unnoticed by the Emperor. "Give me the vial," Valerian commanded, his voice deadly calm. When the priestess hesitated, 2 royal guards moved to instantly flank her. Reluctantly, she surrendered the blue liquid to the Emperor, who examined it carefully. "This bears the unmistakable mark of the Nephilim orchid," he observed, his expression darkening ominously. "A substance that does not purify but rather severs? Specifically, it severs bonded connections of all kinds including familial ones." His gaze immediately shifted to Axon. "Why would my daughter require such a thing, Counselor?" Axon's practiced composure finally shattered. "The human has corrupted her. Can you not see it? They have formed an abomination, a Darth Bond between species. It must be severed before it permanently taints our royal bloodline." The chamber fell into stunned silence as the terrible accusation hung in the air. All eyes instantly turned to Ariana, who was now standing shakily, successfully fighting through the remaining effects of the Vosanti. "Is this true?" the Emperor asked his daughter, his voice barely audible, filled with devastating shock. Ariana straightened her posture, summoning every ounce of her royal dignity despite the overwhelming circumstances. "Yes, Father," she affirmed. When Lieutenant Cade intercepted the assassination attempt, his blood mixed with mine upon the ancestral symbols. The Darth Bond activated of its own accord. Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the council members. Several instinctively made warding gestures against perceived contamination. "Impossible," one elderly counselor protested. "The sacred bond cannot form with non-Verlian blood. Our ancestors ensured this protection." "And yet, it has happened," Ariana replied firmly. "The bond is entirely real and it grows stronger daily. This alone proves what I have argued all along, that the differences between our species are not as fundamental as tradition has led us to believe." Axon immediately seized upon this confirmation. "You see, she admits to the abomination. This proves her unfitness to rule. The poison. No, the cleansing agent was absolutely necessary to free her from this corruption before it became irreversible. And yet you concealed this necessity within a sacred ritual without informing me," the Emperor observed coldly. "You acted without imperial authority, Counselor." "I acted to preserve our bloodline and sacred traditions," Axon insisted, his composure entirely abandoning him. "Something you have visibly failed to do since Sarella poisoned your mind with her progressive nonsense." The public mention of the dead queen in such inflammatory terms visibly shocked the Emperor. His expression hardened into something cold and deeply dangerous as he turned to the guards. "Detain Counselor Axon and these priestesses," he ordered, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "They will be questioned thoroughly regarding this unauthorized addition to a sacred imperial ritual." As loyal guards moved to comply, Axon made a desperate, final gesture toward the remaining temple guards, his clearly prepositioned loyalists. 3 of them instantly moved to block the royal guards, while a 4th rushed directly toward Ariana with a weapon drawn. Elias reacted instinctively, once again placing himself between the princess and the imminent danger. But this time, something truly extraordinary occurred. The Darth Bond pulsed with unprecedented power, and Elias felt Ariana's consciousness partially merge with his own. Suddenly, he had access to fighting techniques he had never learned, ancient Verlian martial arts passed down through generations of royal guardians. His body moved with a fluid, lethal grace that combined his rigid military training with these newly accessible skills. He disarmed the attacking guard with a precise strike to nerve points that human anatomy didn't even possess, but Verlian physiology did, knowledge that came directly through the bond from Ariana's ancestral memories. Similarly, Ariana found herself instantaneously accessing Elias's combat awareness, anticipating threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Together, moving like a perfectly coordinated unit linked by the bond, they neutralized the immediate danger. Meanwhile, Axon, seeing his elaborate plan spectacularly crumbling, made a desperate lunge toward the Emperor with a concealed blade. Elias sensed the attack through the bond, Ariana's heightened awareness of court dynamics instantly recognizing the subtle shift in Axon's posture before he even moved. "Father, behind you!" Ariana cried out. The Emperor turned just in time to avoid the full force of the strike, receiving only a glancing wound to his shoulder. Royal guards instantly subdued Axon, violently forcing him to his knees before the Emperor he had just attempted to assassinate. Treason. Valerian pronounced, his voice vibrating with barely controlled fury. Against the crown, against your sacred oaths, against the very traditions you claim to protect. Axon glared defiantly. I acted to preserve Varelia from corruption. History will vindicate me when your daughter's human-tainted bloodline destroys everything our ancestors built. The Emperor regarded his former trusted advisor with cold disdain. You will have ample time to contemplate historical vindication in the isolation cells beneath the palace. As guards led Axon and his co-conspirators away, Valerian turned his attention entirely to Elias and Ariana. His expression was utterly unreadable as he studied them, paying particular attention to the faint luminescence that pulsed visibly beneath their skin where the bond was strongest. We have much to discuss, he said finally, about this bond, about its profound implications and about the future of Varelia. But not here. This sacred space has been defiled enough today. He addressed the remaining counselors. The full council will convene tomorrow at midday to address these unprecedented events. As they departed the temple, Elias and Ariana walked side by side, their connection humming with renewed strength. After the temporary separation they shared, through the bond, a complex mixture of relief, acute uncertainty and unwavering determination. What happens now? Elias thought, finding that direct mental communication came more easily after their partial consciousness merger during the fight. We faced the council together, Ariana replied similarly. And we proved that the Darth Bond's choice was not a mistake or an abomination, but perhaps the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples. Elias wasn't certain that such optimism was truly warranted given the horrified reactions of many counselors, but one thing had become abundantly clear. Their fates were now inextricably linked, not just by the bond, but by the massive political earthquake they had just triggered in Verlian society. The Great Hall of Ancestral Judgment had not been used for an official imperial proceeding in over a century. Its vast, circular chamber, lined with colossal statues of past emperors and empresses, created an atmosphere of solemn historical weight that no modern setting could ever match. The stone floor was intricately inlaid with luminescent minerals that formed a complex pattern representing the interconnected bloodlines of all noble Verlian houses, a powerful visual reminder that any judgment rendered here affected not just individuals but lineages stretching back for millennia. Elias stood faithfully beside Ariana in the center of this imposing space, both of them positioned directly upon the imperial house's symbol. Surrounding them in concentric circles were the remaining council members, the heads of all major noble houses, military commanders including Riva, Earth diplomatic representatives led by Ambassador Thorn, and various religious and cultural leaders. Emperor Valerian sat upon a temporary throne elevated above the proceedings. Despite the fresh wound from Axon's attack, he projected complete imperial authority, his face set in an expression of solemn purpose. We gather to address matters unprecedented in our long history, the Emperor began, his powerful voice carrying effortlessly through the acoustically perfect chamber. The attempted assassination of Princess Ariana, the treasonous conspiracy of High Counselor Axon, and most significantly for our future, the formation of a Darth Bond between the heir to the eternal throne and a human officer. Murmurs immediately rippled through the assembled dignitaries, though no one dared interrupt the Emperor directly. Before judgment is rendered, Valerian continued, we shall hear testimony from all relevant parties, beginning with the bond-bearers themselves. Ariana stepped forward first, every inch the royal heir, despite the immense uncertainty of her position. Honored father, esteemed council, noble houses of Varelia, she began, her voice clear and confident. The Darth Bond that now connects Lieutenant Elias Cade and myself activated through no deliberate action on either of our parts. It came into being the moment he placed himself between an assassin's blade and my heart, an act of selfless protection that our most sacred traditions have always honored. She paused, allowing her words to fully settle before continuing. For generations, we have staunchly believed that the Darth Bond could only form between Verlians of noble blood. This fundamental assumption has now been proven false, which immediately raises a profound question. What other assumptions about our separation from other species might also be incorrect? This direct challenge to conventional wisdom caused visible discomfort among the traditionalists. But Ariana pressed on. The bond has progressed through 3 phases already: initiation, memory sharing, and protection. In each stage, it has functioned exactly as our ancient texts describe, despite Lieutenant Cade's human physiology. More significantly, during yesterday's confrontation, we experienced the beginning of the fourth phase, unification, accessing each other's abilities in a critical moment of shared danger. She turned slightly toward Elias, their connected energies visibly pulsing beneath their skin. This is not an abomination, as Counselor Axon claimed, but perhaps the most profound evidence yet that the path of cautious engagement with other worlds, the path my mother advocated, is indeed our destiny. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably, but others nodded thoughtfully. Elias noticed Ambassador Thorne watching with barely concealed amazement, clearly processing the immediate diplomatic implications of this unprecedented connection. When Ariana concluded, Elias stepped forward to offer his own perspective. He spoke plainly without diplomatic flourishes or political calculation, an approach that seemed to resonate strongly with many of the military leaders present. I did not come to Varelia seeking this bond, he stated candidly. Nor did I fully comprehend its immense significance when it activated. But having experienced its powerful effects, having shared memories and abilities with Princess Ariana, I cannot view it as anything but meaningful. He then directly addressed the central concern that seemed to underlie much of the opposition. I understand your deep fear of contamination or dilution of your traditions. Earth's history contains many examples of cultures that disappeared through uncontrolled integration with others. But there is a crucial difference between thoughtful engagement and reckless abandonment of identity. The Darth Bond itself proves this. It has connected us without erasing either of our distinct natures. Following their testimony, various experts presented evidence regarding the bond's authenticity and implications. Temple scholars confirmed that all observable manifestations matched historical accounts of legitimate Darth Bonds. Medical specialists presented scans showing the unprecedented quantum resonance between Varelia and human cellular structures. Most compelling was the testimony of Elder Sonai, who had helped them access the temple passages. The ancient priestess, respected even by the most conservative factions, presented historical texts suggesting that the original architects of the Darth Bond had specifically designed it to recognize worthy souls regardless of physical form, a crucial nuance that had been lost over centuries of isolationist interpretation. Throughout these presentations, Elias and Ariana remained connected through the bond, sharing observations and providing each other strength as the massive weight of scrutiny pressed upon them. They could sense the chamber's emotional currents gradually shifting from initial outrage and shock toward cautious curiosity, at least among some factions. Finally, Emperor Valerian rose to deliver his judgment, silence instantly falling across the hall. The evidence presented confirms beyond all doubt that a true Darth Bond exists between my daughter and Lieutenant Cade, he declared. Our ancestral laws regarding such bonds are clear and inviolable. Those joined by the Darth Bond are considered unified in purpose by the explicit will of our ancestors themselves. No earthly authority, not even the Emperor, may sever or deny such a connection. He paused, his gaze sweeping the assembly. However, the unprecedented nature of this particular bond, crossing species boundaries that we believed impermeable, requires us to consider its broader implications very carefully. The tension in the room was palpable as all waited for the Emperor's next words. Princess Ariana remains heir to the eternal throne, he continued, triggering visible relief from her supporters and resigned acceptance from most opposition factions. The Darth Bond's selection of Lieutenant Cade as her protector must be honored according to our most sacred traditions. Here he paused again, clearly approaching the most controversial aspect of his decision. Therefore, I hereby establish a new position within our imperial structure. Darth Sentinel of the Crown. Lieutenant Elias Cade will hold this position with all the rights and responsibilities traditionally accorded to bonded protectors, while simultaneously serving as a bridge between our world and Earth. Murmurs erupted again, but Valerian raised a single hand for silence. This arrangement honors both our traditions and the new reality we must now navigate. The Darth Bond has always been viewed as a sign from our ancestors, guidance during times of significant change. We would be fools to ignore such guidance now, when the wider galaxy presses ever closer to our borders. His expression softened slightly as he looked directly at his daughter. Sarella would be proud of your courage, Ariana. Perhaps she understood more than any of us what the future would require. The formal declaration was followed by a complex ritual that officially recognized Elias's unprecedented position. He knelt before the Emperor to receive a ceremonial band of office, a metallic armband inscribed with symbols representing both his Earth origins and his new Varelian connection. As the ceremony concluded and the assembly began to disperse, Ambassador Thorn approached Elias with an expression that mingled profound disbelief and intense diplomatic calculation. "Well, Lieutenant," Ambassador Thorn said quietly, "when I assigned you to observe a diplomatic function, I didn't anticipate you becoming a permanent fixture in an alien royal court." "Neither did I, sir," Elias admitted. Thorn studied him thoughtfully. "Earth Command will have questions, many questions about the nature of this bond and its potential significance for interspecies relations." "I understand, sir. I'm prepared to provide whatever information might be helpful." "Are you?" Thorn asked pointedly. "Because from what I've observed, this connection goes far beyond professional duty or diplomatic convenience. The implications are profound." Before Elias could respond, Ariana joined them, acknowledging the ambassador with formal respect. "Ambassador Thorn, I hope you will convey to your government that Lieutenant Cade's new position represents an unprecedented opportunity for deepening understanding between our worlds." "Indeed, Your Highness," Thorn replied smoothly. "Though I suspect many on Earth will wonder where his ultimate loyalties now lie." The question hung in the air, its significance extending beyond mere diplomacy, straight to the core of Elias's identity. Through their bond, Ariana sensed his momentary uncertainty, the pull between his Earth origins and his new Verlian connection. "His loyalty is to truth and protection," she answered for him, "as it has always been." The bond did not change Lieutenant Cade's essence. It simply recognized qualities that already existed. Thorn nodded thoughtfully. "A diplomatic answer, Your Highness. I look forward to seeing how this unprecedented arrangement develops." He turned back to Elias. "I'll expect regular reports, Lieutenant. This position of yours may have been arranged by ancient alien mysticism, but you're still technically attached to the Earth Diplomatic Corps." "Yes, sir," Elias agreed, though they both understood that the situation had moved well beyond the normal chain of command. In the days that followed, Elias and Ariana worked to establish the practical parameters of their new reality. The bond continued to strengthen, allowing increasingly sophisticated mental communication and emotional awareness. They developed protocols for maintaining appropriate boundaries, crucial for both Ariana's political functions and Elias's personal sanity. The wider political implications quickly began to materialize. Moderate factions within the Verlian nobility, emboldened by the Emperor's public acceptance of the bond, started advocating for the careful expansion of diplomatic and cultural exchanges with Earth and other allied worlds. Conservative elements remained opposed but had lost significant influence following Axon's failed treason. 1 month after the temple confrontation, Ariana presided over the first official joint cultural exchange between Varelia and Earth. Elias stood at her side during the opening ceremony, their bond a visible reminder of the unprecedented connection now forming between their worlds. As Ariana delivered her address, emphasizing shared values while respecting differences, he felt a surge of pride through their connection, not just for her diplomatic skill but for the vision she was bringing to life. Later that evening, they walked alone through the palace gardens, one of the few places where they could speak privately without the constant weight of observation. "Your mother would indeed be proud," Elias said, referencing the memory he had experienced of Queen Sorella's dying wish. Ariana smiled, an expression that had become more frequent as the political pressure gradually eased. "Sometimes I feel her presence, especially during important moments. Perhaps it's just memory. Or perhaps something more. Having experienced the reality of the Darth Bond, I'm less quick to dismiss the something more possibilities," Elias admitted. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the twin moons of Varelia casting their distinctive blue-silver light across the crystalline plants that surrounded them. "I received a message from my mother today," Elias said eventually. "Ambassador Thorn had arranged for it to be transmitted from Earth." "How did she react to your new position?" Ariana asked, sensing the emotional complexity behind his statement. "Better than I expected. She said she always knew I'd find my place eventually, though she admitted an alien royal court wasn't on her list of possibilities." He smiled slightly at the memory. "She wants to visit if that ever becomes possible." "I would like to meet her," Ariana said sincerely. "The memories I've experienced through the bond show how much she shaped who you are." Elias nodded, then hesitated before voicing the question that had been on his mind increasingly often. "What happens when the bond reaches completion? The final phase?" Ariana turned to face him directly. "According to the ancient texts, completion represents the full realization of the bond's purpose. A permanent joining that transcends ordinary connections. Bonded pairs who reached this state were said to experience a synthesis of strengths while maintaining their individual identities." "That's the technical answer," Elias observed. "But not the complete one," she smiled at his perception, a benefit of their deepening connection. No, not complete. In our history, many bonded pairs who reached completion also formed personal unions. The intensity of the connection often led naturally to romantic attachment, though this was never a requirement of the bond itself. The possibility hung between them, unacknowledged until now, but increasingly difficult to ignore as their connection deepened on multiple levels. And is that something you would consider? Elias asked carefully. Through the bond, he felt her genuine consideration of the question, free from political calculation or cultural prejudice. I believe the bond forms between those who are already aligned in essential ways, even if they don't recognize it initially, she said thoughtfully. It doesn't create compatibility, it reveals it. She reached out, taking his hand in a gesture that sent warmth cascading through their connection. So yes, Elias, it is something I would consider. Not because the bond demands it, but because what we've discovered through this connection is something rare and valuable, something worth exploring further when the time is right. The admission shifted something fundamental between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities that extended beyond duty or tradition into territory that was both more personal and more profound. As they continued their walk, the bond hummed with shared purpose and silent understanding. They had become living symbols of connection between worlds that had once seemed irreconcilably separate. Whether as diplomatic partners, bound protectors, or potentially something more intimate, their journey had only just begun. A bridge between traditions and innovations, between preservation and necessary change. And for Elias, who had once lost everything for following his conscience, there was a sense of having found not just purpose but home, not on Earth or Varelia specifically, but in the profound connection that now defined his existence. The Darth Bond had changed everything. Yet, in some essential way, it had simply revealed who he had always been. Someone willing to stand between danger and those who needed protection regardless of the cost. Something on your mind? Ariana asked, sensing his contemplation through their bond. Just thinking that sometimes the longest journeys lead exactly where we needed to go, he replied with a smile. Even when the destination wasn't on any map we recognized. She nodded in understanding, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. That's the true wisdom of the Darth Bond, I think. It doesn't create paths that never existed. It illuminates those that were always possible but required courage to walk.